Hi, and welcome to Kunsang Payal Choling. We're thrilled to have you with us on our Wednesday night teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon. This teaching is entitled Heart Commitments, and because it was long, we divided it into two parts. One will be tonight, and one will be the following Wednesday at 7:30. Just so you're not confused during the teaching, Heart Commitments refers to a Tibetan word, samaya, which is essentially the promises or the commitments you make with your teacher in exchange for a pure path to enlightenment. So pretty good deal, actually, but not so easy to keep. And in any case, Jetsunma gives us a lot of good information on this, and with no further ado, we will let her speak for herself.
In this retreat on Guru Yoga, we have spent some time discussing the samaya, or commitment, between the teacher and the student. But mostly we've been talking about the teacher's part of it. But we've talked about it in this way. We've said that when a student and a teacher come together, following in the footsteps of Guru Rinpoche as he taught, then the relationship between the student and the teacher is upheld by the teacher in a very profound way. That is to say that once the teacher accepts a student as their very own and takes them into their heart and actually into their body, speech, and mind, you might consider, then it is the teacher's commitment to bring blessings and benefit to that student, not only in this lifetime, but in every future lifetime. The student then becomes extremely important to the teacher, in that the teacher, upon accepting the student fully, once that relationship has been established, promises to return lifetime after lifetime in whatever form is necessary in order to be of benefit to that student. So there is a heart commitment, or heart samaya. When the teacher looks into the face of the student, the teacher says to the student, or thinks to the student in their heart and in their mind, "I will not abandon you. I will not abandon you to remain alone in cyclic existence." So the commitment is that the teacher promises to see the student through until supreme realization. This then becomes a samaya, or commitment, that lasts life after life. From life to death, from life to death, from life to death. Again and again and again, this relationship returns. And there are many stories about how lamas, recognizing their students or seeing their students from the time before, whatever that time might be, feel great joy at seeing the face of a student again. Tremendous joy, as though seeing their beloved child once more. As though having the opportunity to nurture their beloved child once more. And this is a very beautiful and happy thing. What about, however, the commitment by the student to the teacher, or the samaya between the student and the teacher? What is that all about? There must be something, because there must be some kind of reciprocal relationship. Obviously, the teacher cannot insist on the student's progress without the student's willingness. The student has to be willing to follow Lord Buddha's teachings, has to be willing to accept the objects of refuge as their true refuge from the sufferings of samsara. So there is a reciprocal commitment that is required. It is extremely important that the teacher maintain their ethical and moral responsibility to the student. That is to say that the teacher honor the student and think of the student with such high regard and with such respect that actually it is said that a pure teacher will consider the student to be worth more than their own safety or comfort. In a sense, they hold the student up. In the same way that a parent holds up their child, not necessarily as superior, but as so vitally important and so cared for. Any of you who have been parents know that in a dangerous situation, before you will think of your own safety, if you have that bonding and love with your child, you'll think about the safety of the child first. That's always the case. And when mother hears the cry of her baby child hungry for food, mother doesn't say, "I'm not ready to feed you now. It's not convenient for me to feed you now. I have no wish to feed you now." Instead, the mother wants to answer the child's call as though the mother was filled with milk and the child were very hungry. It's very instinctive and very natural. So that relationship occurs in that way on the teacher's side of the fence. But now what about the student? How does the student consider? Well, there are certain teachings and certain rules that one must follow, but I don't like to think of them as merely following dogmatic rules. I like to think of this samaya, or commitment, as a samaya of the heart, something that is deep and profound. Instead of like a cheap or gaudy display, it doesn't burn hot like paper, quick and then gone. It burns deep and slow, like good strong hardwood, or even better, good strong coal, something that burns hot for a long time, steadily, without interruption. This is how the relationship between the guru and disciple should be. So when the student learns about the samaya that they are keeping with the teacher, they should hold that samaya not as so much as a duty and responsibility, but more as a jewel, just as the teacher holds the student as a jewel. So that relationship then is considered precious, valuable, from the heart. Not a methodical thing, not a thing done by rote, not a thing done blindly without any understanding, but a deep and pervasive samaya, or commitment, that is a heart connection that serves to ultimately enhance the practice and the level of accomplishment that comes from practicing Guru Yoga. So I'd like to speak about that, but before I do, there is a reminder that I would like to bring forth, and this is really straight from the Buddhist teaching. And that is this. The Buddha has taught us some main thoughts. These main thoughts are necessarily pervade all other levels of Buddhist doctrine or Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist teaching. And they are the foundational, logical thoughts that you have to use to think through the logic of the philosophy of the Buddha Dharma. Without these fundamental thoughts, nothing that we accomplish in Dharma will make any sense or have any real weight. And we are encouraged as Dharma students not to have some kind of blind faith based on no recognition of cause and effect relationships, but instead to have a faith that is based, yes, on heart, but also on logic, also on reasonableness. Lord Buddha himself taught that you should examine the teachings. If they do not seem reasonable in logic to you, if it doesn't seem thoughtful and reasonable and intelligent, having learned these foundational thoughts, to continue on in the way the Buddha has prescribed, then you shouldn't do it. The Buddha has taught that Dharma should be logical and reasonable, and the way that the Buddha laid it out, it is. It is. For myself, as some of you know my story, I was not born in a Tibetan monastery. I was found here in America. I was born in Brooklyn, and to half Jewish, half Italian heritage, a little Catholic, a little lox and bagels. And when my teacher found me, he found me when I was 38 years old. So I was already established in whatever habits I had, probably most of them bad. We have a lot of bad habits by the time we're 38, don't we? But by the time I found my teacher, I was quite established in a certain way. But I have found that in that meeting with my teacher, there is a certain communication that has come to me that I have come to understand that is logical and reasonable about the Buddha's teaching. There's a certain way to follow through the teaching that even appeals to a hard-headed Brooklyn, half-Jewish, half-Italian gal like me. And I am a very practical person. I am a very practical person. So when I view the Buddha's teachings, I want to know that they make sense to me. I want to know that they are reasonable. I myself would have difficulty following something that didn't seem reasonable to me in some way. Taking into account certain facts that sentient beings cannot actually gather all the necessary data by which to evaluate this logical Buddhist teaching. So we have to rely to some degree, and to a large degree actually, on the Buddha's perception. For instance, all sentient beings do not have the capacity to actually evaluate samsara, or the wheel of death and rebirth, that conditioned life, realistically. In the same way that if we had no TV cameras and no satellite communication, none of our modern tools regarding that, we wouldn't know for sure, let's say, that there are people in China. We could hear about it. We could even hear Chinese people come to America and tell us that it exists. But for ourselves, unless we had gone there, we'd never know. Not really, not for sure. But in today's day, we have a TV set and news reporters and newspaper pictures and satellites that broadcast information, and it tells us that we can see China with our own eyes, even though it's on the other side of the world. So in a way, the Buddha acts like that for us. As sentient beings revolving in samsara, just wandering in samsara, trying to go through life in the ordinary ways that students go through life, we are unable to see some of the conditions of samsara. For instance, the Buddha teaches us that there are 6 realms of cyclic existence. 6 different realms, only one of which is human. There are the hellish realms, there are the hungry ghost realms, there are the animal realms, there are the human realms, there are the jealous god realms, there are the long life god realms. Did I name them all? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. I need an abacus up and one of those bead counters up here. So, the Buddha teaches us about these different realms. Well, I haven't seen all of them, and mostly everybody I know hasn't seen all of them, at least not that they can remember. I know for sure there are animals. I know for sure there are humans. But how can any of us know about these other realms? We have to rely, therefore, on the Buddha's enlightened perspective, which is born from the profound realization that the Buddha accomplished and described when he said simply, I am awake. I am awake. So we rely on that perception. And in that perception, the Buddha has taught us many things. One of the things that Buddha has taught us is that all sentient beings are suffering. Suffering is all pervasive. And even if you're having a beautiful day, and I hate to spoil it for you by even pronouncing the word suffering if you're having a wonderful day, but this is the necessity to learn the reality of cyclic existence. It's a little bit like needing to walk through a room full of furniture and obstacles and room dividers and shelves and sofas and rugs and all kinds of things. But unfortunately, because our vision is so obscured, it's as though that room were dark and the shades drawn and there were no lights on. The Buddha instructs us to learn about cyclic existence would be like turning a light on in that room. The difference being that if you don't know and you're unaware of the condition of cyclic existence, it's kind of like trying to get through a room full of obstacles with no help, no vision, no way to decide how to get through that room. So you're going to stumble over things, you're going to fall over things. There will be many, many hurtful and painful obstacles. Instead, the Buddha recommends turn the lights on. Be aware of the condition of cyclic existence. Know what you're up against. Strategize your path through life intelligently, rather than living carelessly and haphazardly, stumbling over everything, having every obstacle that could take you down, in fact, take you down. Many of us have experienced painful life situations that could have been prevented by the generation of some merit or kind acts that produce virtue within the mind stream. So the Buddha teaches us to know carefully what samsara actually is. One of the things that I have learned since I met with my teacher is to follow these fundamental thoughts very carefully, starting with that one. And let me continue with that then. All sentient beings are suffering. That is to say that suffering is all pervasive. According to the Buddha's teachings, we are all suffering from desire. It seems as though we are suffering from external circumstances, but in fact, we are suffering from desire. In fact, we are actually suffering from our response to desire as well. So we have a complicated, dualistic, or I should say, double-edged kind of suffering. We have the suffering that comes from desire, but we also have the suffering that comes from the suffering that is invoked when desire is not met. So it's two-edged and more complicated than one would think. All sentient beings are suffering. They are suffering from desire. But there is an end to suffering. And this is the news that's so good, it's almost hard to take in. This is the news that is so magnificent that it's actually hard to understand when we have had an entire life. Many of us already have reached maturity, and we've noticed that there's always something. There's always something. Everything that comes together separates. Everything that was really good and has brought a lot of joy and a lot of benefit, gone. Even if we find ourselves in the most joyous, gorgeous, fabulous mood, it lasts about 10 minutes. So we've noticed that happiness is ephemeral. It comes and goes. It sort of burns away and it returns. And in between, there is that suffering. So when we hear that there is an end to suffering, a cessation to suffering, we wonder, how can this be? How can this possibly be? The Buddha teaches us the next thought then. That end or cessation of suffering is called enlightenment. Yes, that's true. It's hard to understand because none of us, being ordinary sentient beings, have experienced that enlightenment yet. Sentient beings simply have not experienced yet. So they do not know what the cessation of suffering actually feels like. And so then, after introducing these thoughts rather than easy for me to say, after introducing these thoughts, Lord Buddha then teaches us how to accomplish the cessation of suffering, or enlightenment. And in many forms of Buddhism, Lord Buddha teaches the Eightfold Path, In our system of Buddhism, there is that teaching, but then also that is condensed into the accomplishment of two things, wisdom and knowledge. So we are taught that in order to accomplish the cessation of suffering, we must exit samsara and enter into that precious awakened state called enlightenment. Now, when we consider the student's relationship with the teacher on this path, we're talking about very high stakes. We're not talking about a student-teacher relationship in order to get through a 6-week course. We're not talking about a student-teacher relationship in order to graduate with so many credits from college. We're talking about a student-teacher relationship wherein the end result would be the ultimate fruit or jewel, the crown of cyclic existence. That is the potential or capacity to enter into the door of liberation and be free of suffering at last. These are enormous stakes. And so both parties in the student-teacher relationship have to take that relationship very seriously. Very seriously. I know for a fact that the teachers regard the students with great seriousness, that their love for the students is unconditional, that once that student-teacher relationship has taken place and the teacher has become for the student Guru Rinpoche's appearance in the world, Lord Buddha's appearance in the world, once that happens, there is a love there or a bonding there that cannot be undone by anything in the world. There is nothing in the world that can take Lord Buddha's blessing, Guru Rinpoche's blessing out of your heart. Nothing can do that. Even if the student themselves were to act in a very inappropriate way, breaking the Samaya bond, acting out of accordance with what the teacher has taught, even committing really negative actions, like harming the teacher in some way. It is always the truth that if the student were to make restitution, were to turn their face toward Dharma again and truly wish to accomplish Dharma and wish to separate themselves from their previous non-virtuous acts, the teacher would immediately respond to that. There's no question. As parents, we do that with our children, don't we? Isn't it true that sometimes children will do pretty bad things? We can throw baseballs through windows and knock the cookie jars over and really much worse things. I don't even want to list the bad things that kids can do, because if there are any kids listening, I don't want them to hear about it. So, even though these acts may occur, the parent will always accept the child again. The parent will not stop loving the child. Well, it's true that there is a difficulty there, a burden there, a strain there, a suffering there. But that's your child. A good parent would never turn their face away from their child just because the child made a mistake. Parents know that children are children, immature, with very little discrimination. They are learning that, and it's the parent's job to teach them. Exactly the same with the student and the teacher. The teacher knows that the student are sentient beings. According to the Buddha's teachings, all sentient beings are suffering. They all wish to be happy, but they do not know how to make the causes of happiness occur. They don't understand the cause and effect relationships. So isn't it to be expected that mistakes will be made? Of course mistakes will be made. It's only reasonable and logical. So the teacher would never hold it against the student. That relationship is a relationship that is like the Buddha's compassion, all pervasive, beginningless, conditionless, without end. That's the nature of that love. So when we look to the student's commitment or samaya with the teacher, we should look to see that same depth, that same bonding, that same beauty in that commitment as well. And that commitment should be a joy on both parts. Less the flavor of duty and responsibility than the flavor of love. That love between the student and teacher. That love that is like the Buddha's compassion. So, when we examine what the student's responsibility is, we have to think like this. First of all, according to the teaching, the Lhama, as the spiritual teacher or spiritual master, is the condensed essence of the external and most familiar objects of refuge. They are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So, regarding the student's samaya, or commitment to the teacher, there are these three aspects of commitment. One is, as the Lama is the condensed essence of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, to honor and uphold the Buddha's teachings. That is to say that, for instance, if we are practicing the Buddha Dharma, we should never take Buddhist prayers and the Buddhist texts, which we love and respect, as the Buddha's own speech, like the Buddha's own speech emanation. We should never disrespect these teachings. We should never throw them around or put them under our seats or step on them or treat them as though they were any other object in samsara, like a rag or something. You know, we should never treat them like that. Any objects that are representative of the objects of refuge, such as statues, Dharma texts, images of the Buddhas. It's not that Buddhists have a superficial, external worship of images. It's not like that. This rule or practice is more than anything to develop discrimination in the student's mind, so that the student can isolate or discriminate in their mind what is precious or extraordinary and what is ordinary. Ordinary things are things that arise in samsara and result in samsara. Even things that we need, like enough water to live on. Water is in the world. You can get it from the world, and it results in the satisfaction of worldly thirst. So water isn't the same as Dharma. Dharma arises from the mind of enlightenment, results in enlightenment, and is not ordinary. This stuff will support my life temporarily right now. And if I drink this glass of water and then don't drink any more, I'll last about, 4 or 5 days. But for the Buddha's teaching, even though it may be necessary for me to drink that water to remain alive long enough to read it, we won't forget that. This teaching not only supports my life temporarily and in this moment, but this teaching also provides for me a path or a method by which I can accomplish Dharma, by which I can enter into the door of liberation and be free. And this is a miracle. This is a treasure that doesn't only last one life, or one moment, or 4 days, or whatever. Life after life after life, this treasure. So these things are held up as extraordinary. And so part of the commitment to the student-teacher relationship that the student would have would be to honor this external object of refuge, the Buddha, in image, in all of the displays that we see of the Buddha. To honor the Buddha's presence in the world, to propagate the teaching, to hold up and protect. Now, the Lhama, being the condensed essence of all three objects of refuge, is also considered to be inseparable from the Dharma. The Dharma, actually the Buddha would be considered like the Lama's mind in this case. The Dharma would be like the Lama's speech. So, as a student, together with one's Lama, one takes on the responsibility of learning Dharma. It really isn't enough to go around and say, oh, I have a Buddhist teacher, oh, I have a Buddhist teacher, this is very good, and feel really happy about that. I mean, that's great, I hope you do feel happy about it. But it's not enough to do that and no more. Because it really isn't that valuable to have met with your teacher, which is really very precious. But it isn't that valuable to meet with your Buddhist teacher if you don't follow the Buddha's teaching, which is the Dharma. Because otherwise, basically what you're doing is coming to this temple in Poolesville, Maryland, to be entertained once a week for roughly an hour and a half. Or longer if you engage in other activities. So, a relationship that occurs is really not that valuable. You can get that from Blockbuster. You can get that from Errol's. You don't need a Buddhist teacher for that. What you need a Buddhist teacher for is to connect you to the method, the Dharma, which is the Buddha's speech, so that you can travel on this path in order to accomplish the supreme result of liberation. So the second commitment that a student must make to the teacher is to practice and to learn Dharma, to maintain a healthy spiritual interest in Dharma. And that means, once again, reflecting on the Buddha's foundational teachings, realizing the faults or flaws of cyclic existence. Then we practice a kind of renunciation which makes us eager to drink the nectar of the Buddha's teaching. Because we know that for oneself and for all sentient beings, and we are beginning to develop the mind of compassion, for oneself and for all sentient beings, this Dharma practice represents the end of suffering. So we are eager and pleased to learn Dharma, to learn to think like a Dharma practitioner. And that is the second commitment. The Lama, again, as the condensed essence of all three objects of refuge, is also considered to be the Sangha. And the Sangha, the mystical relationship between the Lama and the Sangha is quite profound, quite beautiful. The Sangha is like the Lama's body, in that the Sangha actually has the samaya, or responsibility, of holding or anchoring the Buddha's teachings in the world, in the same way that the Lama's body or appearance or presence establishes the Buddha's teachings right here in the world. Teachings are here in the world, being conferred here in the world. The Sangha becomes an externalization of that, or an extension of that, I should say. Here in this Sangha, for instance, primarily the ordained, but other Sangha members as well, are trained as umses, like Annie Renee, which is a chant mistress. We have a chant mistress here instead of chant master. We have the chopin, and that's the one who handles ritual objects during the puja. And they're all well trained, all of them have different jobs. We have archivists that keep our books in good, healthy order and keep them in a respectable and clean place. There are many, many different functions, and these are all considered extensions of the Lama's body. This is the Lama's activity. This is the Lama's wheel of activity. The entire Dharma community, then, is the Lama's extended body or wheel of Dharma activity. So the mystical bond between the Lama and the student is more close than one's own breath, more essential than one's own essence, more relevant than one's own mind, speech, body, anything.
Thank you very much for coming today, and we will finish this teaching next week, same time, same YouTube channel, and hope you enjoy it. In addition to these teachings on Wednesdays, we have also teachings by Jetsunma on Sunday mornings at 11, also on YouTube. And let's see, we have meditations on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays at 10. A soak, which is a food offering ceremony, bringing great merit on Monday. We have one every day, Monday through Friday at 5:30, Saturdays at noon, Sundays at 2. And Tira's Beginning Buddhist series will resume later in the summer. We don't have an exact date yet, but it will resume. And daily we have Medicine Buddha on Facebook. It's a short, condensed practice in English. Everyone's welcome to join. We invite you to join us in any of these practices, and also just in any activity here at the temple, which is pretty active most of the time. We've got a garden that's, gearing up again for another season of growing to support the community. We've got animals for petting and that sort of thing, and mostly for your spiritual comfort and reflection. We've got statues and stupas all across the street in our 65-acre peace park and on this side of the street as well. So there are many, many places where you can sit, reflect, have a sacred place to meditate. And as soon as we can, we will be open inside again. Oh my goodness, let it be soon. We really hope you're safe. We hope you have a great week. We hope to see you as we can, online or in person outside. And, hang with us. We're happy to help in any way we can. If you have any questions, I put in the chat. You can email at us at kpc@tara.org. Any questions at all, they'll get directed to the right person. None of us can answer all of them. So that'll be a good thing. If you want to make an offering to Jetsunma and strengthen the bond with her, you can do so at her Gmail account, which is her PayPal account, I guess I should say. Her email for the PayPal account, which is jetsumagift@gmail.com. And that's also in the chat there. So take advantage of what we have. Take a peek at our website and see if there's things that you could get interested in, and then let us know. We'd love to get to know you better. And we wish you good luck, good health, good practice, and good speed in, in this life and all lives. So see you next time.